Couple of seconds.
All right, looks like we're on. Hi, my name is Keith Phipps. I'm here at Olive Films for Spoiler Alert. I'll be your host today. I'm currently the director of film and television at uprocks.com, where you can occasionally read my writing. But you're here not to see me. You're here to see director Tom Holland, who'll be joining us. Tom Holland, I'll do it. Needs no introduction, but I'll do an introduction anyway. You know him for such films as Fright Night, Fatal Beauty, Child's Play, The Temp, and the film we're here to talk about today, Thinner. He also has a film coming out, possibly coming out this year, called Rock, Paper, Dead. And we are here, but again, we're here to talk about Thinner. Without any further ado, also, I want to say that we're sponsored today by Blu-ray.com. Thanks for supporting all this. And with that, Tom Holland, Mr. Holland, how are you today?
I am fine, thank you.
Good.
I'm here.
Can't
always a plus. Don't forget Child's Play in the credits.
I think I said Child's Play, didn't I?
Did you say Child's Play?
Well, I won't forget Child's Play. I think Child's Play is the first film of yours I saw, and I watched it again last year. Still, great movie. Very scary and funny and everything you could hope for. But I have questions about Thinner. Actually, I have questions of my own, but I also have a lot of questions from fans we've been collecting. I'll start with what could be an easy one, or maybe not. But what was the hardest scene to film?
Oh boy. Oh my goodness. You know, the scenes with the fat suit at the beginning, because they've gotten better, but back in those days, the edges would start to lift of the fat suit because of perspiration. And so it was constantly a fight to maintain the illusion that he was, you know, that overweight. So that was sort of an ongoing problem. I'd be shooting something, and I'd say, you know, it was Vince Costini did the effects on set, and Vince would come in and, you know, rub it down and put baby powder on it. But anyway, time consuming, but it was a lot of fun to make.
Yeah, we had a few people write in to ask whether or not, you know, if it were made today, it would probably be done with CGI. What do you see as sort of the pros and cons of doing like an actual, you know, practical suit versus CGI?
I'd do a practical suit any day.
Okay.
I mean, the problem is that CGI is a computer animation that is put on top of what you've shot of the initial image. And so it's always an image on top of an image. And my eye reads it. I think they've gotten so terribly good now that people are accepting it as reality with the Cape Crusader movies, but nothing sells as well as reality. Nothing's as believable as what you're shooting in camera. My preference would be to shoot every effect in camera, and then if needed, sweeten with CGI. You know all this, but what's going on is it's become a crutch for directors. Mm-hmm. You know, don't worry about it. We'll fix it in post with CGI. And anyway, I'm not a huge fan, but I understand the practicality of doing it. It's the same with Child's Play. Child's Play is all puppetry. It's all there's not a shot of CGI, a second of CGI in there. It's all real. Then compare it to when they CGI'd the puppet in the, you know, in all the sequels of the Chucky series or whatever. Your eye reads it. It doesn't have the same reality. And what you're trying to do in film is you're trying to give the audience a willing suspension of disbelief. You're trying to get the audience to believe it. And since so much of what I've done has had fantasy in it, that's been very, very important. And I think that I was very, very lucky to come up at a time when they were doing in-camera real effects. Mm-hmm. So I mean, so anyway, the fat suits are a million times better now than they were when Robert John Burke and I did Thinner.
It's pretty convincing, though. I mean, you know, I thought it kind of remarkable that the effects held up pretty well.
Yeah. Well, that's Vince Costini, and the guy who designed it. Oh boy, The person who originally was on it was Dick Smith, who was the god of makeup people. You know, he did Exorcist. He's almost created it.
Little Big Man. Yeah.
Huh?
He did Little Big
Man,
if I'm not mistaken.
Oh boy, you're going back, but yes, he did do Little Big Man.
Best old age makeup I've ever seen. Still, I think.
But anyway, so Dick Smith, you know, conceptualized it, and then he had health problems, and he turned it over to, and the name's out of my head right now, but it's in the credits. He won an Academy Award for Mrs. Goodfire, and I can't remember his name, but then he designed it, but then it was so time consuming that the one who was left with the on-set makeup who did the work was Vince Quistini. And because of what I said, like perspiration and that kind of thing, all of a sudden you'd see the fat suit, you know, where it melded in with the skin, and that had to be corrected a lot. But I think it really works, and the illusion holds up. So,
a reader named 4,000 DVDs Too Many writes and says, were there other Stephen King stories you were interested in adapting?
Yes. I wanted 2 short stories. One is called, oh God, the one about smoking, 10 O'Clock People. That has interested me. And I also want to do his first published story, which is called Strawberry Spring, which I think you'll find all kinds of shorts have been done on it that are on YouTube. So you can take a look at that one. And then the one that I was really interested in, which I think now might be too much of a commitment for me, but was Duma Key. So with Duma Key is his sort of late middle age, you know, sort of story. It isn't quite a summing up, but it's something that you would get to when you have a little distance on your career. And so that's interesting. The Duma Key, the story rambles a lot, but it's about a man who's successful, who's probably, you know, in his early 60s, and he has an accident on site, on the work site, and he has to give up the career he'd had as a developer, as a construction foreman, and change careers. And it's sort of, you know, what a late middle age story would be. It's just sort of interesting in terms of character. I could go on and I could talk about the other 2 Stephen King pieces too. Strawberry Spring. I think it was published in 1968. And if I did it, I'd go back and I'd do an old-fashioned slasher book. Even I think slasher movies, and I don't think there had been a slasher movie yet.
In '68?
Am I right?
Yeah, no. I mean,
yeah, anything before.
Really, they kind of started to kick in with like Black Christmas and I'm blanking on the name, but a couple other ones.
Well, Black Christmas, that's like 1970.
Early 70s, yeah.
In Texas Chainsaw was 71 or 2.
Maybe a little later. Yeah, around then.
Friday the 13th was around then. Anyway, I don't think any of them was early as 68. But anyway, no. Stephen King wrote a short story, which is a perfect slasher in 1968 before there was such things, which I think is a compliment to Stephen's originality at the time. As he, you know, because he was very young then. Probably still teaching English in high school.
Yeah, a couple of readers wanted to know what it was like having him on set and how the decision came to have him play a role in this film.
I had him play in Thinner you're talking about.
Oh, in Thinner, yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was fine by then. Well, by then Stephen had become Stephen, you know, become Stephen King. I felt that less so on Langoliers. He plays a role in Langoliers too, but it didn't seem to me that Stephen was quite the icon that he was a few years later in Thinner. But anyway, he's terribly nice. He is what he is. What he did, he's an English high school teacher. I mean, you know, and somewhere inside of him, that's still there, you know. If you wrote him a note, he'd probably correct it and give it back to you with a grade.
Yeah. What was it? So you took over the screenplay from Michael McDowell, who's a writer that King admired. What was it? He's probably, for film people, he's probably best known for working on Beetlejuice and Nightmare Before Christmas. What was it like? How did the screenplay change in your hands, and what was it like taking over that script?
Well, first, let me pay a note of in memoriam to Michael McDowell. Michael McDowell was a terrific writer, and much better than I think he's been credited for, because he died so young. I think I probably did more of his work than anybody else. The Amazing Stories I shot for Spielberg with John Cryer, that was written by Michael McDowell. And then I did 3 Tales of the Crypt. And I think he did the first one that I shot with Amanda Plummer. And it got a number of, it was the 3rd one ever done. Third Tales of the Crypt, and Michael McDowell wrote that. And then he did the first draft, which I hardly messed around with at all, on Thinner. And so I think he would have had it. And well, you could see the talent. Beetlejuice, and he wrote a number of books. I think he was good friends with Stephen's wife. My phone's ringing, and hopefully they'll get that very quickly. Somebody in the next room, like my wife, please get that. And of course, they're not picking it up. Anyway, okay. Michael McDowell anyway would have gone on, and I'm sure had a brilliant career, because he I think Beetlejuice was his original. I think it was. And then Nightmare Before Christmas, as you say, just a wonderful, wonderful guy. And once I started to preview the film, I think I made mistakes on it. Okay. The people always talk about what they did right, or people very seldom talk about looking back in retrospect and what they did wrong. The moral theme of Thinner is moral jellyfish get squished in the end. But that Billy, the overweight gentleman, the lead of the story, is morally corrupt, and he can't lose weight. He kills the Gypsy King's wife in a car accident while he's having sex in the car, and he uses his connections in town to get out, to get off any kind of a criminal conviction. And therefore the Gypsy King, Michael Constantine, was wonderful, comes up and does his finger and says, "Thinner," and then he starts to lose weight. Well, I thought that in retrospect, I thought Robert John Burke did such a terrific job. He was so sympathetic that the audience was willing to forgive Billy any of his moral misgivings, many of his moral mistakes. And I think they wanted Billy to win in the end. And if I had showed more about how Billy was morally corrupt, the audience might have been more accepting of a bittersweet ending, which is the ending that was in the book, but they absolutely hated it as a movie. I don't think I've ever had an experience like it. Every time we previewed it, the audience watched, rooted to the spot into the last 2 or 3 minutes. And they were so upset and angry at Billy losing after having gone through all that to get the curse lifted, that they wouldn't accept the ending. And I put in that bullshit, joke at the very end as a cap to tie it up. The original ending I shot was Billy has gotten the Gypsy King to lift the curse, that he finds out his wife is cheating on him with the doctor, and he takes the poison pie and he puts it down in the kitchen, because he knows his wife always gets up before him, and he knows that she always has a piece of toast or whatever, and he knows that she loves cherry pie, and she'll have cherry pie, and then she'll take the curse. In other words, he's killing he wants to kill his own wife because she's cheating on him.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, what happens, this is what I shot, this is in the book. He gets up, he goes downstairs. His wife had left the house, but his daughter is there. The only person he really loves is 17-year-old daughter. And his daughter has eaten a piece of the pie. And he knows that he has inadvertently killed the only thing in life that he loves. And after she's left, he looks at the is by taking, he eats a piece of pie. And then I slow pullback, that showed him isolated and alone, and the audience hated it. They just hated it. So I put in that ending where he sees the doctor. I was going to get the doctor. Always very odd audience reaction that strong at one specific point, as it was with that movie. And so I think I think it's very, very hard to sell a down ending or a bitter bit ending. I think it's gotten better now in the horror genre because things are so much darker today, or people feel like that anyway. I think it would be accepted today. But that movie's damn near 20 years old, I think. And back then, the audience did not want their hero to lose.
It's interesting, though, as someone else points out, and doing reading reviews for this, the most common criticism was that none of the characters were sympathetic, even Billy.
Well, they should read the book and take their argument to Stephen King. Talk to Stephen about that, why don't you? Does Stephen write happy endings? He did.
He has, but not. I think the end of Pet Sematary is one of the darkest things you'll ever read.
Well, see, I thought because of Pet Sematary, I thought that Thinner would work because they'd accepted it in Pet Sematary, but it didn't work in Thinner, and I suspect, who the hell ever knows, but I suspect it was because I made him too heroic in the screenplay, and Michael McDowell, and also because there was something so winning about John Burke, about his performance. You really wanted Billy to get out of the mess that he was in, and that's the performance of the actor. Terrific actor, by the way.
Yeah, and he does. Yeah, I thought he did a good job acting through the suit too. Of course, he'd been RoboCop not that long before that, so I guess he's kind of used to being in prosthetics.
Well, that being the lead in Thinner was not easy because he had to start out in the fat suit, and that was at least a third of the movie before he started to come down, and even as he got to his normal weight and then started to lose more, the only way to do that was he stopped eating. So he tried to gain weight, and then he purposefully did everything he could to make himself as thin as possible. It was a rugged journey for Robert Burke.
So we talked about the ending, but another reader writes, and Rock and Rick writes in and says, "Are there any things you change watching this movie today?"
Yeah, I gave up the judge. In the book, the judge is Billy goes to see him at his house. He's in his tub, and he has turned into Scale Man. He had over his body, and it's a horrible scene. And I got pressure from the studio to cut because we were going over budget. I don't remember the details, but I gave that up. And I played it as a scene with the wife talking about it as opposed to showing the judge in the bathtub. And I think that was a mistake, and I should have fought for it, and I should have given you another shot of a monster, of the price that this group that was in concert with Billy were paying in The Revenge of the Gypsy King. So I wish that I'd fought for and kept that effect scene. And my feeling is now about that is that if possible, I wouldn't give up an effect in a movie anymore. I mean, if something is in there and I think it's really crucial to the script, and even to the feel of the movie, I would fight. I would fight to keep effects in now. I'm not talking about CGI. I'm talking about in-camera effects. See, the difference is CGI is in post-production. When you're in post-production, the pressure's off of you because you don't have a full crew standing around you. You don't have a burn rate of whatever it is, 50, 75, 100K a day, or more than that, 500K a day. But now I would fight harder for in-camera effects now than I ever have before. And part of that, a lot of that is because of the experience on Thinner. I really value in-camera effects.
So,
especially in monster movies.
Yeah, definitely. And so someone wanted a reader Butler asked why you took such a long break from directing films after Thinner.
Very, very good question. And a very, very long answer. And I don't think I really want to say very much about that. I went into sinusitis. If you really, who's interested? But I had health problems. I have sinus problems. I had an operation a year ago. I became so desperate. I don't know if you've ever had sinus infections, but I was getting like 3-4 a year, and it just knocked the hell out of me.
Yeah,
I'm going on for 14 years.
Yeah, they can knock you out for sure. My wife has sinus problems, and I've seen her suffer from it as well. So,
I'll give you another one. I don't know if anybody's watching this, but what I feel now is you can have a medical emergency, but if it's something that is easily diagnosable, if it's something that's very, very common, they can work miracles, like heart, for instance. Mm-hmm. But if you have something like allergies and sinus infections, there's no one way to deal with it. And then I've gone to supposedly the best people in LA for allergies and for sinus infections, and really basically they don't know any more than you do or I do about that. Then they say, well, it's genetics. They say, well, it's allergies. But no, when they get into allergies, you're getting into an art form as far as medicine is concerned. So anyway, that's a large part of the story of why I haven't directed in a long time. I didn't want to take on a bigger movie. You're looking at 40 days plus, okay? And then before you're through, you're looking at a year and a half. That's a huge commitment with a lot of money behind it. And I don't think I was in the shape to do something that lasted that long. Anyway.
Well, it's on a more pleasant topic than, almost all topics are more pleasant, but so I forget what the name of the reader who wrote in, but someone wants to know, like, what were your horror films growing up?
I lost the question.
What were your favorite horror films growing up? What were the horror films that influenced you the most as a director?
The things that I saw as a kid, I'm sure like you and like all the fans who were watching this. In my time, I was watching Hammer. And then after Hammer, I started watching all the AIP ripoffs. And the AIP stuff was really echoing Hammer. Look at any of the stuff that Roger Corman did with Vincent Price. He's trying to ride the wave of the Hammer film. So those were my favorites. And the film that changed my life was Psycho. And I think Psycho's 1961. I was a little kid, and I watched it with my hands in front of my eyes. But that was the first time that I realized that somebody was editing this stuff. Before that, I think, when I was watching films, they shot the Hammer films big proscenium arch because they had these huge expensive sets that they wanted to show off, and they saturated the color. It was still Gothic. It was still Victorian, what Hammer was doing in the 50s out of Great Britain. And all of that changed in 1961 with Psycho. But it's still, you're still through the 60s, you still had Corman working, Mask of the Red Death. Jack Nicholson was in several of them. But Psycho really changed it. And then Then Hammer tried to echo Psycho with a number of psychological horror films that were written by, I think the guy's a singer, maybe there was one writer director who really did a lot of the Hammer attempts to echo Psycho, which is to say to rip off Psycho. And that, of course, is when everything sort of spun out of shape and everything changed. But Psycho was the first time that, I don't know, it was like, you have to remember there were no film schools around then. It was like a shot. I don't know, it was all of a sudden, oh my God, somebody's planning this about how you cut these things together, how you cut these pieces. And before that, I don't think I was aware that they cut. But I mean, if you look at the Hammer films, there's a large, establishing master to get the set. Then they go in for a tide or two. They'd have two overs and maybe a single. I mean, in other words, everything that was shot with Hammer was shot like the same way they were shooting in 1937.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing. They went into horror and it was wonderful and all that, but there was nothing new in terms of making film about it. The Hammer films, I mean, what changed film and really the beginning of modern horror is Alfred Hitchcock's horror, Psycho. I wrote Psycho too, so I'm very, very aware of it all.
Right. Back to Thinner for a second. Stin writes and asks, if you were to reimagine this film for 2018, what would you do differently?
Well, I think in a way I already said that. I do. Yeah. The fat suits are so much better. I do. Yeah. I would do even more. I wouldn't give up the judge in the bathtub as the Gill Man, and I would have made a lot clearer how ambivalent Billy was as a hero. Of course, I think that Stephen King's moral, the moral of The Thinner, is you can't escape justice.
Right.
Karma is karma. I mean, you hate to think of it that way in this world where everything is now relative and where they're trying to tell you there's no bad or good or evil or good, but believe me, there is, and that's somewhere, and that is the moral in Thinner. That if you do something wrong, something really terribly wrong, it's going to come back on you. And I'm not just talking about your conscience. I think that was the weight that underlaid Thinner. Thinner's a really serious book. It's not. I mean, that was what's so attractive about it to me. I thought, well, this is a chance to do horror and do character at the same time. And I think that I sort of missed it by allowing Billy to be too sympathetic and too heroic.
It reminds me in some ways of like an EC Comics. Did you have in mind when you were making it?
Say again.
It reminds me of like an EC Comics Tales from the Crypt kind of story in some ways. Did you have that in mind when?
No, I don't think. But that time I'd done the Tales of the Crypt. I think before that. No, I didn't think of it that way. I thought it was a character study because there was something sort of. It was sort of about the infrastructure of a mid-sized town, the power structure that made the town work, and that's what Billy was. Billy was an attorney, and the doctor was the friend, the judge was the friend, and it was all about everybody rubbing everybody else's back. But you're in a situation where the Gypsy King isn't going to let you get away with it.
Do you feel like it's kind of found more of an audience over the years? Or a wider audience over the years?
Thinner, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Thinner's interesting because when it came out, it wasn't a success in the theaters. And then slowly they started to play it on streaming and on cable, and it went on Netflix and Amazon, and it's just growing and growing. I'd say in the last 10 years or so. That's as opposed. I wrote Cloak and Dagger, one of my favorite scripts.
That's actually the first one I saw. Then
first film. Okay, well, I mean that's a better script than it is a movie. If you really want to get into this, who's listening to this anyway? Any idea?
Nope. Just whoever's tuning in, and it's going to be on the internet after we're done, so it'll have an audience. Like your movie, it'll have an audience after we're done with it.
Okay, so you put it on YouTube. Is that what you do?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, then maybe people will pick it up because these are serious and even weighty matters. I mean, I don't know why. It's a mystery to me, and I wonder quite often why some of my films have lasted and grown in popularity, and other films that I thought were wonderful, that were huge. I'm thinking of Cloak and Dagger now. Cloak and Dagger was not a success also when it was released, I guess around 83, 4, 5. Anyway, they put that on rotation back when it was only cable, before streaming and the internet. And any kid that I met who grew up in the 90s, would love Cloak and Dagger. Now in the aughts and now in the teens, nobody remembers it anymore because it isn't playing anywhere on rotation. Whereas Thinner has gotten, a much wider audience with being picked up for much wider release with the streaming channels. I don't know. Every one of them, Fright Night never went out. It never stopped. The love for that movie is beyond. The Child's Play, because it kicked off the whole Child's Play and Chucky series. Is the first one that created Chucky, and that's done nothing but that's turned into a huge merchandising business. That hasn't got anything to do with me. I only did the first one, but I think that because of the sequels and merchandising, and because Chucky may be the last horror icon. I can't think of any. Maybe Ghostface in Scream, but I can't think of any other horror icon that's been created. Certainly not as big as since Chucky. So I know why that one kept growing. I mean, the first one was an enormous success. But Psycho 2 is interesting. Psycho 2 was the biggest movie in the summer of 1982. I mean, now that's unthinkable. Unless you have a Marvel movie, you don't have a shot. But that was the biggest movie in the summer of 1982. And then it slowly just sort of slipped away as it got buried under the Psycho legacy, the Psycho sequels. The Psycho 2 born a whole business of making Psycho. And some of it's been terrific, some of it's been god awful. The latest one, The Base Motel, is really very, very good from what I've seen. But all of that has carried it on. But Psycho 2 was found by the critics. And maybe the movie's now 30 years old, at least more than that, 35 maybe. But that movie, because the critics picked it up and wrote about it online. So Psycho 2 is just sort of, I don't think it grows in terms of audience estimation, but in terms of critical estimation, it does. It was the last time that the original group that made the original Psycho from Mr. Hitchcock got together. I mean, Tony was still with us. The lady, who gets murdered in it, who was in the original Psycho. Loomis was the character's name. Anyway, the cast, the script supervisor was Hitchcock's script supervisor. The producer was Hilton Green, who'd been the first AD on Psycho, the original Psycho. So that was a very, very special moment in time, because I got to see all those. They were my heroes. Okay, I mean, I know you like Cloak and Dagger growing up, but it's whatever you experienced at that moment in your life when you became aware of film, I guess, is a way of putting it. And I'm not even sure that as we sit here right now, I'm not even sure that film isn't getting obliterated by streaming. I mean, I wonder if the 90, 100-minute format is going out as they release things that are bingeable in 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-hour, chunks. So, I mean, the art form, if it's an art form, the form is certainly changing. Even now, I guess it always does, but it used to change a lot slower. And digital is just, it was slow at first, but I mean, now it's really blowing it up. I mean, you can watch, you can tell film is in danger. Cannes doesn't want to show films that haven't had a theatrical release. The Academy that does the Academy Awards out here doesn't want to show films that haven't had a theatrical release. And yet at the same time, all of what's really interesting is going on streaming, or it's more interesting than, generally speaking, Oh shit. I'll have to call you back. Call me back in an hour, whoever you are. Thank you. Jesus God. You know, I've got a conference call. Anyway, it's the whole form is changing now because of the economics of what's going on as everybody goes to streaming. And so I don't even know of what we're talking about, the art form of movies, as you and I are talking now. I don't even know if that will survive. But yet right now it seems to me that there was a period where independents were more interesting than the studio product. And that period ended. That ended 12 years ago. I don't know. And now you've had more interesting work coming out of the streamers, out of Netflix and Amazon and Hulu. And yet at the same time, oh, come on. Hello. Yes, I'm on the phone. Please call me back in an hour. Well, everything's in flux, you know, and I'm not so sure I like it either. And I'm very, very tired of all the Cape Crusaders and of the huge CGI movies. And yet I think to myself, well, okay, does that mean I'm getting older? Well, obviously I'm getting older. But I mean, does that mean that the standards or what I have is changing? And I think back to when I did Psycho 2 and it was a huge success. I had at the Writers Guild, there was a panel that I was part of. And I was sitting there with the original writer who'd written the Psycho book. He also wrote for Amicus.
Robert Bloch.
Yes, Robert Bloch. And Robert Bloch and I sat there, and Robert Bloch told me that he thought I'd been too gratuitously violent in the writing and making of Psycho 2. And I remember sitting there and thinking to myself, well, I mean, you're an older guy. You know, you're just not accepting the way it's going. And then I think I wonder to myself, well, is that what I'm thinking too? I mean, I enjoyed the Cape Cruise. Let's see, The Dark Knight came out as a comic book in 87 or 88.
Yeah.
Okay, that was interesting, and Nolan's stuff was interesting doing it. But now it's become like I'm sick of the Marvel universe.
Yeah, there's a lot of it.
That's all there is. That's all there is. I mean, in terms of movies, that's all the studios are producing. And then they wonder why Netflix and why the streamers are eating their lunch. Well, anyway, enough of that. Not tirade done.
It does seem though like the Thinner kind of came at one of the last moments where mid-sized movies were still something that studios made. Did you get that feeling at the time that was kind of the window was closing for that sort of mid-level horror movie?
Yeah, you could feel it. You could feel it. I mean, it's the same way now. You're watching the death of cable. You're watching the bundles breaking up. People don't want to pay that money. They're pulling the cord, cutting the cord. I mean, the way I used to feel about it was the popular culture recycled every 2, 3, 4 years. Now I'm not so sure it isn't every 6, 8 months.
Yeah,
it's moving so fast now because of the technological changes, but at the same time now the technology is freezing up and becoming old-fashioned because you now have monopoly. I mean, everything's Google, Facebook, Amazon, or I don't know, it's Apple or even Microsoft in there. I don't know, but you have 3 or 4 monopolies now that control the internet.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is, the internet's not as much fun as it was in 2000.
No, I can't disagree with you that much. So focusing back on your movies, do you see a through line from Fright Night through Thinner and the other films? Is there anything that ties them together? If someone wanted to look for the grand theory of what Tom Holland's films were, where would you point them?
Say it again. I mean, you're on to something.
Is there anything that ties your films together? Like if you were looking at from Fright Night to Thinner, the films you directed, what's the common theme? What unites them?
Well, I came in a moment when I could write was a very short window. It came out of the 70s, and that came off of Easy Rider in the late 60s, which made the majors very insecure because they felt like they were losing touch with the generation then, which was the boomers. And so they threw the doors open in the 70s. And I caught the tail end of that. I started really, Beast Within I wrote in 79. I think it was produced in 1980. But I mean, I got in when original stories were still, you could get them made, you could write them, you could sell them. And I thought it was incredibly exciting. So I was very, very lucky. And then I lived through to see all that close down. And by 2000, that had closed down. And Hollywood became about minimizing risk. And as you minimize risk, of course, things get less interesting. You're not going to take a risk. And now what you have with streaming is you have an explosion into a global marketplace. They're not making movies for America anymore. Americans aren't making movies for Americans. They're making movies for these huge worldwide audience, specifically China. So, so movies themselves no longer reflect what's going on in the country. I mean, horror still does. Horror is the most plastic of the genres left. And that's because they're inexpensive to produce, if not downright cheap. And because they have the biggest chance of any genre of remuneration. You have your best chance to make a buck with a horror movie. And they're cheap to produce, and that's still true now. And that's been true all my life. They were the entry-level jobs forever. Because there are so many horror movies made, they are the most responsive to whatever the sociological changes are in the country. They're a thermometer of what's going on emotionally in the country in a way that the movies used to be, but are no longer, because the movies don't make money with reality. They make money with Marvel, and now they're going to try DC. They just hired the biggest guy away from Marvel over to see if they can invigorate DC. But that tells you what the major studios are interested in. They're interested in comic book movies because they're safe and they travel worldwide.
Well, so, I'm getting the signal to wind things down. So anything else you want to talk about?
No, I've got a conference call in 15 minutes.
Okay, well,
I thank you very, very much.
I want to plug your site, which is thterrortime.com. And that's
yes, please.
All things Tom Holland there. And
we have a very vibrant store of signed merchandise also.
Including
I'm doing a Fright Night comic book, and I'm not that far away from having it ready to go. And I'm working on the novel of Fright Night 3 Resurrection right now. So I mean that, so I want to get that out there, especially when I have them done.
Yeah, for sure. And then so check that out. You can also purchase. I'm sure you can purchase Thinner from Olive Films there, or Olive Films.
You can purchase Thinner signed from Tom Holland's Terror Time store.
You can't beat that. And then olivefilms.com for everything Olive Films. We want to thank Blu-ray.com for helping us set all this up. And that's it. My name is Keith Phipps. Mr. Holland, pleasure to talk to you.
And would you thank everybody at Olive Films for me?
Absolutely.
Thank them for yeah, they did a great job on the transfer with Thinner and the 4K, and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Sorry.